And we are recording. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our admin's author chat team top 10 of the year. That's quite the mouthful. So, this has not been an easy year, has it, ladies? So many good books, so many amazing authors to talk about, and I hate making this list. I hate it. You both mean because you enjoy my misery so much every year. Right, who's going to go first, Kaz?
I'll go first, but I felt your misery this year because my list to make this list was about 30 books.
Ooh, it's brutal, really isn't it?
Like, I was walking around this morning going, why isn't that on the list?
Yeah, I'd read nearly 60 books when I went back. So to cut it down to 10 with honourable mentions is brutal.
I have been really strict with myself and I hate it. I have a top 10 that isn't a sneaky top 20 this year. There's actually 10 books in my top 10 and I've got 5 honourable mentions, and the amount of books that are swimming in my head from this year, it's impossible. It's just
I've got a top 10 that's the top 11 and don't care.
You rebel.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Have as many as you want.
Good.
Right. Kaz, honourable mentions.
No, we do honourable mentions later. It's top 10. Number 10.
I thought we did honourable mentions first.
No, they go in at like number... See, we can't even agree on how we do this. I put them in after number 4 before we get to the top 3.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay. Well, don't cut all of that bit out because people can see that we haven't got a clue. And mainly me. Mainly me.
This bit in as well.
This is why you don't put me in charge as the host. Okay, let's try this again. Kaz, what is your number 10 on your list this year?
Number 10 on my list is Miss Blaine's Prefect and the Weird Sisters by Olga Rotas, which I've pronounced really badly. But I absolutely love the series of them. And I met Olga at Harrogate this year. She's brilliant.
I know you raved at the time, so yeah.
I've raved about all of these. This is number 3 in the series. There is a 4th book that I haven't got yet. They follow someone who is an ex-pupil of the Marcia Blaine School for Girls, which is like made famous in what's the book? The Crime of Miss Jean Brodie. And the woman's like a librarian, and she time travels back to random places in time, and she has to work out why she's there, and then like solve the mission. And they hate the Crime of Miss Jean Brodie. Like, she hides copies of it in the library. She like has a cupboard where she locks them away because it doesn't represent her school well. And they're just really funny. The one I've got on my list involves Macbeth, witches, and a black cat. And my review of it at the time described it as joyful, witty, delightful, and thoroughly intelligent.
Well,
so
that sounds like a good number 10.
It is a good number 10.
Karen, what's your number 10?
So some of the books I've got hard copies of, some I read digitally. So I've got this one. So number 10 is Most Wonderful Crime of the Year by Ali Carter. So this is set around an author called Maggie, who is a successful cozy crime writer in America. She gets approached by somebody to go on a mystery visit to England. When she gets there, she finds out not only is she traveling with her nemesis, Ethan, who's a thriller writer and a bit of a big head, but when she gets there, she realizes that she's been invited to the estate of her super fan, queen of crime, Eleanor Ashley. But when she gets there, the first night is all like full of these dysfunctional characters, and then the next morning Eleanor has disappeared. So it's a real sort of take on that sort of Agatha Christie disappearance, but set in like contemporary times. And my sort of review at the time was think modern day Agatha Christie, but it's got humor, crime, Christmas, snow, and a little bit of romance.
Love that. My number 10 is Becca Day, The Woman in the Cabin. Deep in the woods, you can hide more than secrets. What a tagline. So there is a couple, husband and wife, that live in a cabin in the woods, as it seems. And Cal is the husband. He goes off to work every day, and Mary stays and does housewifey things, but kind of traditional. We're looking at tradwife stuff here. So has his tea on the table and keeps the cabin clean and tends the garden and doesn't stray very far from anywhere, but is everything as it seems. She finds a stack of letters hidden under the floorboard in the bedroom, and the detail of life eerily similar to her own, and they are addressed to her, to the next woman. So there is so much going on behind the scenes in this one, and it's sinister and creepy, and just, I love Becca Day's books anyway. This one was just next level for me. So The Woman in the Cabin, number 10. Kaz, number 9.
The 10s sound pretty great. I've put ticks by 2 to go back and order things. This is just going to be expensive. My number 9 is This Charming Man by C.K. McDonald. I've discovered him this year, so I've had the books for a while, but I read the Stranger Diary this year as well. It starts with the tagline of vampires do not exist. Everyone knows this, so it's particularly annoying when they start popping up around Manchester.
I've read a lot of Queeve's books. The Bunny McGarry series, absolutely hilarious. So I'm not surprised this made it onto your list.
This is brilliant because it's proper urban fantasy, but they all work for a paper that's a bit like the Fortean Times, but in Manchester. And then all the things are kind of real, but they're writing these things and nobody believes them. And they have a crank hotline where people ring up and they get the paper, the reports from and things like that. And it's just the guy who owns the paper is hilarious. He's really angry and sweary, and he's banned from swearing by someone, and he has a list of ones that he can use that are numbered. So then he starts just calling people a 1 and 2 and things like that. Which is great. But yeah, I absolutely love them, and I like the musical title references to things in Manchester and things like that. And I've got a few more to go, so very happy that I've discovered them as a series this year.
Oh, I love vampire books. I must have to. That's going to be another one on my list. So,
what happened to the book buying ban, Karen?
It doesn't start until the 1st of January.
Yeah, there you go. You can pop up.
Get in there quickly.
Your number 9
is The Guest by Agnes Raverton. So it's a Scandinavian crime with a difference. A couple visit a remote cabin in Norway. Karen and Kai. Kai is building a jetty for the owner, Iris, who Karen went to school with. And Karen's very insecure about her past and sort of being a bit of the sort of poor girl at school. So Karen meets the neighbours, Per and Hilma, who's a famous author. And she pretends to be someone who she's not, which is as much as I'm going to say about that. But she befriends the pair, and it's just really, really clever because it doesn't go where you think it's going to go at all. It's really tense, and it really sort of blindsided me, this one, because it's very tense and it has a real moralistic tale running through it of sort of envy, self-doubt and insecurity. And I would thoroughly recommend it. It's, really, really good.
Number 9, Sandy Jones, The Trade-Off. So this is kind of a look into the world of journalism and how the choices that journalists make, and not just the journalists, but their bosses and kind of the things that they're told to do, how that impacts the people on the news, on the newspaper pages. So we've got Jess, who's kind of a rookie reporter, and she gets drawn into a whole, I can't even think, bloody hell. Right, let me start that one again and you'll just have to cut that bit out, sorry. I started trying to go too much into detail and then forgot.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'm editing number 9's cursed. So go for it.
Yeah, let's quickly get on to number 8.
Because I started with urban fantasy.
So number 9 is Sandy Jones, The Trade-Off. Really enjoyed talking to Sandy about this. So it's basically a look behind the scenes with journalists and how the decisions that are made in the back rooms by the bosses of the journalists, how they impact what goes onto the front pages and how that has an impact on people's lives. And there's so much more involved in it, but it was fascinating. And there were so many things that were brought to mind, recent news stories with different people who I won't mention, but, there were some people who've been treated appallingly by the media and paid a price for it. So I just highly recommend it. And Sandy's new book turned up the other day for me to read for next year, and I'm thrilled. So yay. So Sandy Jones, The Trade-Offs. Kaz, number 8.
Can I just point out I'm the only one with a Christmas t-shirt on?
I considered doing something Christmassy, but I didn't think it was, I don't know, and then I changed my mind.
I went festive.
I will for Winterfest.
Snowflake.
Oh, there you go. Winning. My number 8 is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. So not crime, but I love kind of cozy fantasy stories. This is about someone who's a kind of top-rate scholar of fairies and folklore. I bet she's terrible with people, and she ends up in this like isolated Scandinavian place investigating something, and it's not quite what it seems. But it's just, it's a lovely series, and I've got the second one to read that I'm very excited about jumping into.
Number 8. So my number 8 is, I have got it, The Knowing by Emma Hines. It's a debut novel set in Victorian Manhattan. And it looks at Flora, who lives with a tattooist called Jordan, who is a really vile and horrible man and controls her. She's basically a mystic as well. She reads tarot cards and she can speak to the dead, and she's got a gift that she calls The Knowing, hence the title of the book. And she meets a circus performer called Minnie, who offers to take her away from cruel Jordan. And this book is full of really strong characters, female characters, and they're all fighting to be free from mainly men. It's got supernatural elements, and I loved it because it's really dark, gripping, and very shocking.
So number 8 for me is Julie Anderson, The Midnight Man. I love this book, and if you go into the group and have a look, search for Julie Anderson's name, there's some photos and different things that there are real buildings that are now used for different things that that the book's set in, and it's Faye in LA, and it's set post-war, and there is a murdered woman. Her body's found after she's been missing, and it's found behind a locked door, and then we kind of have to figure out how she was placed behind this locked door. Who does anyone have a key for this door? How can anybody have ended up there? And then the main focus for me after that was the fact that they started a women's only hospital, which was a real place. You can kind of look it up. And Julie just made this so interesting, weaving all of the actual facts of the things that she could find out and creating the story so that the history of these women, the real women, wouldn't be lost. It's a really clever idea behind a book, and just absolutely fascinating, and just a brilliant read.
Sounds good. So number 7 is my number 7. Karen is going to approve of me. Is The Examiner by Janice Hallett. I really like this. I've thoroughly got Janice's writing style with this book. because it's like really immersive and you kind of feel like you're discovering the crime as you go. So basically, it follows like a small group of people on an MA course, and you get to see all of their messages between each other, all of the like tutors kind of feedback to them, things like that. And then there's like something going on, and the examiner has been brought in to sort of check the MA has been run properly. Is kind of unpicking what's happening almost as it's happening, which is really good. I didn't approve of the teacher of the MA course. I think that's just my like education thing going on. I was like, no, this is terrible. But I really enjoyed the book. It was great. Absolutely loved it. And I went on a bit of a Janice Hallett read afterwards.
I do approve. I read it on holiday. And yeah, I mean, I think when you get her writing, I think, yeah, it's just, you just want to read everything that she's written, I think, because it's, yeah, just unique.
Yeah, she's got such a unique style, and it really just gelled for me with this one. More like I've read others of hers and enjoyed them, but this one just was the one that really, really gelled for me. Your number 7, Karen?
My number 7 is, I think actually when I was going through, I thought I've had a bit of a historic moment this year. So this one is The Curse of I keep doing that. Curse of Penrith Hall by Jess Armstrong. And it's the first in the series about Ruby Vaughan, who lives in Exeter, which is obviously close to my heart, being from a Devon girl. And she runs a bookshop with an octogenarian called Mr. Owen. And this book, she goes down to Cornwall and visits Penrith Hall. And at Penrith Hall lives her once dear friend Tamsin, who's now married to the sinister Sir Edward Chenoweth, and she goes to Cornwall to deliver some rare books, and she meets up with a Peller, which I didn't know what a Peller was, but apparently it's a witch in Cornwall, and he's called Ruan Kivel, and basically they sort of begin to solve mysteries together. It's gripping, it's macabre, there's lots of murder, there's lots of full of unexpected characters. And I've just read the second book in the series, and that will be perhaps mentioned later, maybe not. But it's sort of, yeah, I think I just really like the series. I really like the characters. I like how the characters are developing. So that's why this one is my number 7.
Brilliant. Fun.
My number 7 is Christy Jane Newport. Put my teeth back in. The Ordinary Man. I love the DCI Beth Fellows series, and just this one really creepy. Missing women, murdered women, weird ways of torturing people while they were still alive. There's an interesting scene with a kitchen item. I'm not going to say anything more, although I do think it's been mentioned in the group, this weird thing that was used the thing isn't weird, but the way it was used was. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. If not, you'll know it when you get to it, is all I'm going to say. And I love how dark Christy takes the books, but also the family element of this. Aunt Marja is one of my favorite characters in anything. She's just wonderful, and it's dark, it's funny, it's just really, it kind of feels like catching up with old friends when you see all of the characters together, and I just loved this book. So yeah, that was my number 7.
Great. So we're getting number 6 for me is something that's probably going to come up later as well with other people's lists. So my number 6 is All as Sinners by Katie Massey. And it's one of those, you know, when we're really privileged because we get to talk to authors all the time about their books. After reading this and then talking to Katie, this is what put this on this list. The interview with her as well is the reason why it's here. But it's like a really slow burn book. It's kind of set in the time of the Yorkshire Ripper, which is something I didn't think I wanted to read. And we were talking about this before we recorded, weren't we? Because I live in Leeds, and it just feels a bit too close to home. it follows someone who owns a brothel in Leeds, and it's sort of set during the time. It doesn't involve that, but it is like an undercurrent of in how, you know, like the women travel. So they don't travel on their own. They go everywhere in a taxi at night, you know, things like that. There's like little bits of it kind of creeping into the sort of atmosphere, but it's not about the kind of Ripper murders. But the woman owns a brothel and she gets involved in investigating the murder of a young boy. And it's just one of those, it took you a while to get involved, but then the more you thought about it afterwards, the more you were like, this is a stunning kind of read. I can't do it justice by explaining it, but it's absolutely brilliant.
That sounds really interesting. So my number 6 is A Lesson in Cruelty by Harriet Tice. And again, like you just said, Kaz, I spoke to Harriet on the group, and it was a really difficult book to review because it's so clever. And when I spoke to her, it was really difficult to speak to her about it without giving away too much. It's one of those books that you just have to read because it's basically about 3 women. Anna, who's in prison.
Oh, that's a good face.
You froze after you said Anna, who's in prison, and then you were just.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what's wrong with my internet today. So it looks fine on my end. So it's just odd.
Keep going though.
Keep going. Yeah, Anna. So Lucy's a PhD student who's in love with her professor, and Marie lives in the Highlands. And each woman has a story, and when you read it, you think, how are these women? How can they be connected? But it's really clever how they are and how the author weaves that into the story. It's got a really compulsive narrative, and it's very clever and very unpredictable.
Good. Sam?
Number 6. So it is a joint number 6, but they're both the same author. So we've got The Mercy Chair and Nobody's Hero by M.W. Craven. So I'll keep it brief. I won't say too much about either because we could go on forever. But this is a really personal story for Washington Poe. And both books, you know, dark and funny, the kind of thing that I've come to expect from Mike. And then the Ben Koenig books are more action and all kinds of things going on. They both, I get something very different from both of them, and they're both quite different, even though you can tell that Mike's written them. They're both very different kind of stories. So I didn't want to choose between them, so I'm not going to. That's it. Not going to. So that's they are number 6.
Brilliant. So we'll do number 5 next.
Go for it.
Number 5 is where I've cheated as well. Because I couldn't choose. So I've got 2 mangas, because I always have like a comic on the list.
Yeah.
I've got Fat Atelier by Kamomi Shirahama and Insomniacs After School by Makoto Ojiro. And I just couldn't decide. Like one day this one was on the list and one day this one was on the list. And then I eventually decided that they were both going to be on the list.
Fair enough.
I love them both. One's a story about a young girl like who wants to be a witch, and she's told that she can't be because it's like inherited and special and only people with certain powers can have it. And then she discovers the only thing you actually need is this special ink and the ability to draw. And like all kinds of things in tube. But it's like beautifully done, like it breaks the fourth wall, like the art going in between the sort of pages of the comic is important. And it's really lovely. And Insomniacs After School is a tale of like 2 teenagers who can't sleep at night. They're insomniacs and they find a place in school where they can sleep, and they both find the same place and then find each other. And then they end up just being friends because they're awake in like the middle of the night, and it's like really adorable, and they kind of just have this lovely little wholesome friendship that's really nice, and it's just adorable and lovely. It needs to be read. So.
Are they both standalones? Because quite often with manga, they can be part of a series, can't they?
They are both a series, but they're a series that's well worth getting invested in.
Interesting. So no, my number 5 is The Fellowship of the Puzzle Makers by Samuel Burr. And the story begins with Pippa, who is a part of the Fellowship of the Puzzle Makers, finding a baby abandoned on the steps of the headquarters of the Fellowship. This baby is Clayton, and then the book jumps forward to now, and Clayton is 25 years old, and Pippa has just passed away. He's got many unanswered questions about his paternity, and Pippa was the only mother he needed when he was alive, but now she's gone. She's left him a puzzle. The biggest puzzle he'll ever have which is finding out who he is, where he came from, and how he ended up in a hat box on the steps of the Fellowship of the Puzzle Makers. It's a really clever book because it's written in puzzles, so he has to solve puzzles as he goes through to try and find out where he's come from and who he is. But it's also really joyful and full of like friendship and camaraderie, and I loved it.
Great.
My number 5, we are on number 5, right?
Yeah.
Is K.E. Cullen, Crumpets Again for Breakfast. This is a police procedural that's not like any I've ever read before. So, excuse me. Anna Clark is, she's a mom and a wife, and she has all that kind of, she's juggling all that kind of stuff. She's stuck in this job that it's not really doing anything for her, and she's not really getting what she wants for herself out of her life now that her daughter's a bit older and her husband's kind of settled at work. She gets offered another job, and so we're kind of looking at her trying to make a fresh start. But at the time this happens, that the police procedural side of the book means that the chapters are set in pre and post incident. We don't know what the incident is, and I like the fact that was dangled in front of me the whole time. Didn't know what it is till a certain point, but it didn't make any difference because the interviews that the police were doing were really interesting, and watching Anna kind of try and wing it is just funny. And the whole thing, I just loved the book. I really loved the book. So I would highly recommend it. And I don't know if Katie has written any other police books off the top of my head, but yeah, Crumpets Again for Breakfast. It's even the title, the monotony of kind of life before things go horribly wrong, as they often do in these books.
Great. Do we want to do number 4 next, or our honourable mentions?
Don't mind.
Look how slick we are and planned out.
Right, let's do number 4 and then honourable mentions.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
do it in my list. So yeah, cool. Yeah. So my number 4, I'm going historical crime, and I've got City of Vengeance by David Bishop, or D.V. Bishop is how he writes. It's set in 1530s Florence, and we follow Cesare Aldo, who works for what is like essentially the police force in that time, and they're very different kind of historical crime stories, I think. So they're very brutal. They're really well researched. Like if you've been to Florence, you feel like you're walking back through the streets with him in the story. They've got real people and real events kind of mixed in with the fiction, which is really seamlessly done. It's a bit like you were saying in your other one. So you don't feel like that, that's kind of convoluted at all. Do you know what I mean? It feels like this fictional event happened at the same time as a real one, and they feel both as real as each other. Cesare is like a gay man in a time when it's like essentially he would be arrested if people find out that that's what he is. So he has to kind of hide that, and I think that adds like a different twist to the kind of historical crime stories. Like you don't read many books like that, and it's another sort of element to it that makes it a really compelling read. I absolutely love the series. I read one for the interview with him, and I've just been reading the rest throughout the year because they're so good.
Excellent. So my number 4 is Frank and Red by Matt Coyne. And and it's a story of an elderly man, Frank, who's recently lost his wife, and Red, a 6-year-old boy who moves in next door to him. Frank is very angry at the loss of his wife, and Red moves next door, and he doesn't read the social cues like adults do, that Frank doesn't want him anywhere near him. And he just carries on bulldozing through. And this starts a sort of unlikely friendship between the two. Red's also suffering because he's just started a new school, and he's got things going on. And it's quite a simple story about two people, but it's actually really sort of uplifting and heartbreaking in places when it's the sort of things happen to both of them. But I really, really loved it. It was just an unputdownable read, and why it is number 4.
My number 4 is David Fennell, A Violent Heart. The Grace Archer books have been on my my list for 2 or 3 years. I think this is the 4th book in the series. So we've got D.I. Grace Archer has a missed call, and when she has a missed call on her phone, and the person who rang is dead. So they weren't dead, they were trying to ring her. I'm not explaining this very well. It's a good start. And then there are cold case elements to this book. There is another a body, what's left of a body found, that's 30 years old, and there is so much going on in this book, and a lot of it comes down to kind of, we're looking at sex work as a job and how people are treated and how they all treat each other. As you'd expect with David Fennell, it is dark, it is mysterious. That, you know, there's some warmth and humanity in it as well, and there's always a point to the books. And I just recommend starting at the beginning of the series and reading your way through, because it's just a brilliant series.
Right. So honourable mentions then. How are we doing the honourable mentions? We're just going to go in order?
Yeah, should we go Kaz, Karen, Sam again?
Yeah. Cool. So my honourable mentions are Codename Madeleine by Barnaby Jameson. It's the story of Noor Inayat Khan, who's like a real person, but really nicely told. It absolutely haunted me. I don't know if I like it or not, but it gave me nightmares.
Right, okay.
Reading it, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. So it's there. It was on my list for quite a while, but I've just got so many things on my list. And I've got Hunted by Abir Mukherjee, which is a really classy thriller. The Skeleton Army by Alice Hawkins. I love her books with like the historical crime element. And then I've got 2 that kind of go together. That again should have been on my list if it could be 20 long, which is The Grand Illusion by Sid Moore, because I love anything she writes, and it was brilliant. And The King's Witches by Kate Foster was her follow-up new book. She wrote The Maiden, which tells you how hard it was to make my list, because it's an honourable mention. And the joy of both of these is they're 2 authors that I absolutely love, and they both have my name in the acknowledgement, which is very exciting.
You will notice that I am holding up no books, and it's because I am so clumsy that I just wasn't risking it today. I already nearly dropped things when I was making a pile of books, so it just wasn't worth it. Karen, honourable mentions.
So my honourable mentions are, I think that in my list, I listened to some books on audiobook, and some I've read, and this first one is an audiobook, which is Crow Moon by Susie Astley, who I interviewed as part of I can't think of the name, the Halloween Fest. Halloween Fest. And so it's really fast paced, it's creepy, it's got a dark story about a woman who basically loses 2 of her children in a fire, and it goes back to look at what happened, but also she then discovers something else that's happened, and it's all around this farmhouse. It's got folklore, it's got creepy witchcraft, missing children, sort of vendettas, and yeah, it's just amazing. And if you want to listen to it on audiobook, it's read really, really well by the narrator, who I haven't written down the name, so sorry narrator, but you were amazing. Then I've got The Beach Hut by Leah Pitt, which is set in Dorset. Sort of a backwards and forwards story about a murder that happened. Well, you don't know if it's a murder. Somebody dies in 1997, and then it sort of goes backwards and forwards between present day and then. We're talking about series, and a series of mine that's a favourite now is the Tom Mead, Joseph Spector series. So Cabaret Macabre, I read and interviewed Tom as part of the group this year. And that one didn't disappoint. That series has become a go-to for me now. And finally, my another audiobook that I've listened to is by Denzel. We didn't know how to Merrick, and it's Murder at Holly House, and it's a perfect Christmassy murder, very Christmassy murder book set in the 1950s. And centres around Inspector Frank Grasby, who's been sent from out to a sort of Yorkshire village because he's been a naughty boy. And what happens when he gets to that village, everybody seems to start being murdered. So it's brilliant. Really loved it.
Cool. Sam?
Honourable mentions, I have 5. So I've got A.K. Turner, Deadfall, Sophie Flynn, What Stays Unsaid, Ruth Kelly, The Ice Retreat, Daniel Sellers, Murder on Skye, and Paul Finch, Rogue. All absolutely brilliant books. And A.K. Turner, the series I've been following. So there is an interview with Ali somewhere in the group and on our YouTube channel. In fact, yeah, I've interviewed all of them about these books. That's the whole point of my list this year, isn't it? I don't think there's anything on there that I haven't interviewed the author. So yeah, just what a cracking collection of books we've had this year. It's been so difficult just to choose.
Really hard to choose. So top 3.
Top 3.
I don't know about you guys, but I've put mine in like no particular order until I get to kind of the top 3.
Okay. Mine are in order, I think, but coming up with that order was really tricky.
Mine are in no particular order until the top 3, and the top 2 could possibly change places depending on in fact, all of my top 3 could change places depending on the day you ask me what my favourite book is.
Fair enough.
But these top 3 are like the top, like really tops of my list.
So go on, what's number 3?
Number
today.
Number 3 for me today is Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands by Sarah Brooks. It is, has anyone seen the movie Annihilation? No? I've described this as like Annihilation on a train.
Right, okay.
Essentially, it follows a journey. It's beautiful as well. Look at the inside. I've taken the cover off, and it gives you a sort of map of the train. So it all happens on this train that you get a map of in the front of the book, which is quite helpful while you're reading it. And it follows the journey of the passengers on a team train across the wastelands between Beijing and Moscow. And essentially, the train can't stop on this journey. It's the safest, quickest way to go. But they don't want to stop in the wastelands. It has to carry on moving and then be quarantined at the end before it can go into the city, because you don't want the wastelands to get in to the train. And then the whole point of the book is what if they already have. And it's just kind of glorious. It's glorious and weird and wonderful, and it's just the joy of a book to read. And there is a little bit of crime on it.
I do like a book on a train. It's just there's something about it.
Yeah. Karen, number 3.
So my number 3 was tricky because they're 3 really excellent books. Well, I mean, all the books on the top 10 are excellent, but the top 3 is even harder. But my number 3 is Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. Again, this was one I listened to on audiobook, and it's a sort of it's got a whole cast of characters, so it's not just one person reading it, that each character has a different voice, which just makes it, just adds to the sort of the suspense even.
We knew what you meant. It's fine. We're all friends here. We're good.
So it's basically set in this sumptuous retreat in the middle of an ancient wood, and basically it's one of those books that you don't want to give too much away, but basically the person who has done this retreat is not a very nice person, and she wants it to be all sort of sparkly and, you know, perfect, and as these things often happen, are not. And it's not long before a body is discovered, and then we sort of go backwards over the past few days leading up to the discovery of the body and find out. But it's got a really great list of characters. It's really spooky. It's got a bit of folklore. It's got a bit of, you know, spooky secrets, sort of past coming into present, and sort of vendettas and revenge. And it's, yeah, really, really good. Loved it.
Okay, number 3. I'm going to do what I should have been doing all along, and apparently cover my camera. That actually might have helped. Number 3, Sheila Bugler, Dark Road Home. I love these books. I love Sheila's books. I say every year, I feel like she's writing just for me. They're just fantastic. So, in a small town, it's impossible to hide. 2 decades after she left Ireland, Leah Ryan is back. She knows she won't get a welcome reception in her hometown of Dungarry, but she's finally ready to face up to the events that forced her to leave as a teenager. As she arrives home, another tragedy is waiting for Leah. Her first love, Eamon Longeran, has been found brutally murdered. At first, Eamon's murder appears unrelated to Leah's past, but in a small town like Dungarry, everything is connected and everyone has secrets. Sometimes there's only one way to ensure the truth stays buried. I love this book. Oh, my word. Anything that Sheila writes, as I said, just hits a certain note for me. I can't wait to read what comes next. And this was a standalone. So there are some series that Sheila's written and some standalones. Go and pick up any of them and you will not be disappointed.
Yeah, I think she's on your list every year. So yeah, she must be doing something right.
Oh, I love her. Love these books so much. Really do. And she's dark. Oh, my word. We always say this, don't we? The kind of... We get to talk to people who are really sweet and really lovely and kind and generous, and you just know that the dark side comes out in the books and not in them. So that's good.
Yes, this is very
Kaz, number 2.
Okay. So my number 2 is another thing from Harrogate. It is Follow the Butterfly by Marta Kaukonen. I saw Marta on the New Blood panel at Harrogate and she was absolutely brilliant. She's funny. Her book sounded amazing. So I invited her to come to the book club for a chat and bought her book. And I'm trying to think about how to explain this without giving away too much. Her book is basically, it follows the story of a female serial killer. So it's already interesting because you've got a female serial killer going for therapy. So it's told with a really small cast of characters, and the chapters sort of change with each sort of character giving a point of view. So you start with a serial killer, then a therapist, then the therapist's husband has a chapter, and there's a newspaper reporter as well who are like the main voices. And you kind of have the therapist trying to unpick the serial killer story and maybe stop her. And that's as far as I'm going to go because it just does not go how you expect it to go. And it's outstanding. It's like a really outstanding psychological thriller. It's superbly written. You kind of hoover it up and then think about it for days after you've read it, because you can't put it down when you're reading it. And how she does it with just more. There's like basically about 4 people and then maybe 2 others just mentioned in passing. She's pulled off this like superb story with like the tiniest cast of characters, and it's outstanding. Can't wait for her to have more things translated.
Brilliant. Karen?
So when I was thinking about my top 2, I thought that it's the 2 books that I have recommended to most people this year, but also the 2 books that have really stayed with me and had an impact on me. And number 2 is definitely one of those books, which is Prima Facie by Susie Miller. Some people might recognize it from the Jodie Comer has done a one-woman show based on the play. So the book was a play first, and it features Tessa, who's a barrister. She's come from a working class background and basically got to the top of her game by working really, really hard, playing by the rules, playing the game. And she goes on a date with a colleague, and basically it goes very badly, and she has to look at her whole life and values. It's got some really distressing scenes in it. It does feature rape, and basically the sort of importance of the book is looking at the injustice of a system for women, basically, who go to court with a rape allegation, and basically she has been part of that system her whole life, and then she has to go against the system, and basically everybody tells her to not do it because she'll never win, and she decides to do it anyway, regardless of what the outcome is, which I won't tell you. But I was really interested. It made me really angry reading it, and I think a book that can do that to you is very special. And apparently they use it in sort of law classrooms now as part of the sort of syllabus to try and so it's a really powerful book, and all sorts has come out of it, and it's definitely one of my number 2. It's totally recommend.
Number 2 on my list this year is Trevor Wood, The Silent Killer. The clock is ticking, there's no escape. DCI Jack Parker has faced down hardened villains and raving drug-addled lunatics. He's disarmed a machete-wielding psychopath and broken devastating news of a loved one's death more times than he can remember. With a serial killer stalking the Newcastle streets and one of his closest colleagues lying in the mortuary following a hit and run, he thinks things are about as tough as they've ever been, but he should know that trouble always comes in threes. Jack is about to face the biggest challenge of his life, one that will end his career and destroy his family, early onset dementia. As he does everything he can to hide his deteriorating condition from his family and colleagues, Jack believes that the serial killer is haunted by his childhood, while his own memories are built on increasingly shifting sands. The race against time to save lives, including his own, has begun. Trevor Wood was on my list last year for with You Can Run, which is another brilliant book. I love the Jimmy Mullen series. There's nothing not to like about Trevor Wood or his books. So The Silent Killer, I believe, has been optioned for TV as well. So fingers crossed we get to see these characters brought to life. It's powerful, it's heartbreaking. There's always some warmth because Trevor, his warmth seeps into his words. And I can't recommend it highly enough. It's a gorgeous book. Kaz.
My top read has been my top read since I read it. So, when you just know a book is going to be your, this is a one that was on my list since I didn't have a list when we said we were booking this chat, but this was the one that I knew was going to be there. And it's Mother Sea by Lorraine Wilson. It is described as being in an island community facing extinction, can hope rise stronger than grief. Mm-hmm. So basically, it's set on a fictitious island in the Indian Ocean. Lorraine Wilson's an ecological scientist who writes as well, so she knows what she's talking about. And it's facing this small community, kind of facing the impact of climate change on the island. they've got other things threatening like the community, and they're having to decide between how much they trust outsiders who are coming in and trying to help and how much they want to stick to their old ways and kind of keep their community alive. And you've got this whole thread through the book of like what happens with their relationships with these people who come in, whether the agendas of the people who come in are honest and really there to help, and then whether they should just stay and like keep their traditions and their community and their island how it is. And it's beautiful. It's like really complex, it's really rich, it's like really beautifully written, and it's just everything good about the book. And everything else that I've got of hers that I've read is also brilliant, because I've done that thing where I've read that and was like, I need to read everything else. So
Karen,
recommend it.
So my number one is a debut, and Kaz touched on it earlier, talking about so it's the list of suspicious things. I can't even get my words out, by Jenny Godfrey, and the blurb is Yorkshire 1979. Margaret Thatcher is the Prime Minister. Miv is convinced that her dad wants to move the family down south because of the murders. So this book is set when the Yorkshire Ripper is at large, and basically it's following a 12-year-old girl, Miv, and her best friend Sharon. Miv has got a really difficult home life, which I won't go into too much detail, but basically her friendship with Sharon is everything. And basically she sort of starts to write a list about people that she thinks are acting suspiciously, hence the list of suspicious things, and starts to sort of do her own investigation into the sort of the Ripper murders. She's in a small town, and some of the things that she does and they do, like, you will be shouting out loud when you're reading the book, as if don't do that, it's really bad, it's really it was emotive, it was compelling. I remember being a young girl, of this age, when the sort of Yorkshire Ripper, and although I wasn't living in Yorkshire, I had family in Yorkshire, so it just felt really real to me. And I don't normally like true crime, so for a book that is featuring a real story and a real serial killer was quite different for me. But I think it was because of the era, but the girls' friendship is everything in this book, and it's got everything. But there's some really awful bits in it as well, understandably to do with the murders, but also to do with the time. And you've got racism, you've got sort of heartbreak in the community, but it's got lots of hope in it as well. So yeah, I was really, really moved by this book, and I absolutely loved it.
My book of the year, I don't think the author will mind me saying this, I did not want to read this. I was interviewing them, and I just, when you just think, I'm not in the right headspace to read this book. So, but I did. And like you, Kaz, since I read it, it's just been the book of the year. It is G.D. Wright, After the Storm. This book, oh my word. So 2 children went into the sea. Only one came out alive, but who is to blame? When Andrew and Sophie take their daughter and her friend to the beach on a stormy day, they are momentarily distracted and both children are washed out to sea. Andrew dives in, but comes back ashore with only one child, Maria, his own daughter. Joe, the son of his best friend and local police officer Chris, is drowned. But it was just a tragic accident, wasn't it? As Sergeant Mike Adams and DS Sue Wilmot investigate what really happened in the water that afternoon, the ripple effects of the tragedy tear the community apart. The detectives must discover the truth before their colleagues. Bereaved and desperate father Chris takes the investigation into his own hands. This book, they are 2 sets of best friends who each have one child, and the parents are looking after the child while the other parents are at work, and they turn their backs, not even really for a second. There's kind of a shallow pool on the beach that the kids are playing in, but it's stormy, and the only reason they're at the beach is because the kids minded them. and they thought, right, we'll go and get kind of 10 minutes maybe before the weather turns. And just everything that happens is devastating. It is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. And when you feel like that, when you were really kind of hesitant to even pick something up because you knew it was going to mess with you, and then it does, but you really don't care that it does because it's so good. I just love this book, and he's got a book out next year. I can't wait to get him back on, interview him about book 2, and just see, how he develops. Because if this is the debut, then yeah, just a phenomenal book.
Fabulous. Well, that's given people lots of things to go away and buy, hasn't it?
Us included.
Yeah, I've definitely got some ticks of things to go on the shopping list.
So you're not on a book buying ban?
No, not at the moment. It's Christmas. You're allowed to buy books when it's Christmas.
I'm just wondering whether I should because my birthday's the end of January, so maybe I have to go until the end of January as well. So actually, that's 2 months.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, you've got to buy books for your birthday.
Exactly, it's the law, isn't it?
Oh, too. Yeah.
I'm just not planning on doing any banning myself of buying something. I'll never get to read them all, but it's only part of the thing, right? You can own the books and look at them, and
I've run out of space. That's the biggest problem. They've had to start going on the floor.
Yeah,
I'm glad you can't see the rest of my office.
I've embraced the floor piles of books.
Absolutely got to be done. I mean, this one here it's just kind of double filled now. There's kind of a line of books behind it, and then I keep stacking them and thinking, right, if I stack them where I can see them, I'll sort it out. Yeah, I don't see them anymore. They're invisible.
See mine have gone to the ceiling. Mine are nearly at ceiling level now on the top of the bookshelf where they're double stacked.
Oh, yeah. I've only not done that because if I did, and people will tell you this, Karen, I knock books onto my head. I have done it live on camera. I have knocked everything over and squealed because I didn't want my books to be harmed. So my head is fine. That can take the brunt, but the books can't.
No.
Well,
thank you both.
You're welcome.
That was fun.
And, no, it wasn't.
We'll see you all again next year.
We'll start planning now, Sam. If we start planning now, we might get there by December 25.
Notebook. I had everything organised, but I don't know where the notebook is.